The year is 2012. The date is November 19th. Our story begins in San Rafael, California, with North Bay Business Journal reporter Jeff Quackenbush. He writes,
Telltale Games just signed a lease for 22,000 square feet of offices that nearly doubles the size of Telltale's studio currently located on the east side of the city. We've maxed out where we're at, said Dan Connors, chief executive officer and co-founder. Civic Center will give us the room we need to grow our team and take on more projects on a yearly basis.
Having made a huge breakthrough, video game company Telltale was the coolest kid on the block. Riding high off the spoils from The Walking Dead, it seemed as if Telltale was on top of the world. Being crowned creators of Game of the Year at the Video Game Awards had given them a new lease of life, and plenty of notoriety. Studio of the Year, Best Adapted Video Game, Best Downloadable Game, Telltale was up there with the rising stars of the era, the likes of Gearbox's Borderlands and Valve's Portal 2, when it came to winning prestigious accolades. Making good friends at the top of the tower, Telltale's pursuit of fame saw the complete rebirth of the adventure genre during an especially competitive time for gaming.
Telltale plans to move into its new home in March or April. The new studio will be able to accommodate 160 employees and satisfy company growth plans for the next few years, Connor said. The company plans to ramp up the staff in 2013.
Telltale was moving away from the coast to develop a bigger network further into town, but they stayed in Marin County, where various other companies like Take-Two Interactive and Activision were now setting up sub-studios. Seeking to secure new IPs for future episodic content, Telltale really wanted to put themselves on the map for all of us to see. Pioneering the world of interactive drama, taking seats on prestigious panels, the company was quickly evolving, but Telltale had not forgotten their roots. In the midst of all the action, Jeff let a secret slip in the press release.
Another major project in production for 2013 is Poker Night at the Inventory, developed in partnership with Warner Brothers.
Wait a minute. Warner Brothers?
Is this a Wirecross thing, or is there a new version coming out with new licensed Looney Tunes characters? I could see Sam trying to peek at Bugs' cards, but an ear smacks him away. Maybe it will be Scooby-Doo and Shaggy? Or maybe Fred Flintstone? Or the Banana Splits? Weren't we hinted with a sequel with Murder at the Inventory?
As long as there are promos for TF2, I'll be happy.
It wasn't beyond the pale. A little earlier that year, Warner Brothers had been muscling in on PAX Prime to showcase their many varied upcoming works. Guardians of Middle-earth, Injustice Gods Among Us, Batman Arkham City, Armored Edition, and Gotham City Imposters, to name a few. Warner Brothers and Telltale were probably talking, and would go on to make games together later, but in the poker department, we know what actually happened. Despite Quackenbush's rumour, it would be a fair few months until fans heard anything firm from Telltale themselves. With The Walking Dead's development over, for now, and with the new staff getting settled into their enlarged office, the studio needed something low stakes to fill the time while planning new projects. Telltale kept quiet until late March, when they posted an empty bowl and told everyone to just check back in a few days, directing fans to an elusive site, thekeyparty.com. The first guest arrived on the 25th, dropping off what seemed to be keys to the DeSoto. 2 days later, an Adult Swim-shaped knife was deposited, and things started getting crowded as a Necronomicon and Robot Eye soon appeared, quickly followed by a companion cube keychain. Commenters speculated, and soon theorized. Could it be another Poker Night at the Inventory? Well, yes, and very obviously so. Team Fortress had already been updated, ready to implement the in-game unlockables at a moment's notice. If that wasn't enough, midway through Telltale's Key campaign, Microsoft leaked the box art for the game, where before some fans were unsure as to whether or not we'd be getting another round of gambling, or some other inventory experience, there was no real mystery anymore. Still, some fans were unsure about what was going on. A key party, of all things, is especially weird. Swingers Night at the Inventory is what one commenter dubbed it. Was this simply an elaborate April Fool's Day hoax, just to be a bit of trivial fun to look back on? Why else would they announce it on April 1st? But this is no bluff, Telltale said, and the skeptics were soon put to rest, as further development details came from the TTG press office. This time it was go big or go home on the unlockables. TF2 hats were back in fashion, alongside Borderlands 2 skins, so those playing on console didn't feel too left out. Actually, they got some extras. For playing on PSN or Xbox, exclusive backgrounds and avatar items followed suit. Nothing was spared from being lootified. In the run-up to release, Steam codes were dropping left, right and centre for Telltale's old titles to get the hype train moving. Fans were even writing their own dialogue trees to try and win copies of the game. Real-life loot was being given away at AMD's Fan Day that year. Telltale had a table showcasing Poker Night 2, although the exact nature of the rare and exclusive prizes one could win from playing the previews remains something of a mystery. Even buying the game early would win you something, that being a copy of the original game. At $5 for 2 titles, Telltale was once again keeping a low profile on prices, much to the delight of their fans. And so, on the 24th of April, 2013, all this ran up so that Poker Night 2 could finally be released. On the Xbox Live Arcade. Yes, rather bizarrely, Telltale was branching out to console territory before hitting the home ground on the PC. But this was not an uncommon practice at the time. Microsoft would often push very hard with multi-platform releases to try and get games out on their home turf first, and Poker Night was no exception. They'd already done the same with Telltale's Jurassic Park the game a year ago, and episodes for The Walking Dead alternated between PSN first or XBLA first. Xbox were trying to snatch up that early custom, away from their rivals, but what Gates forgot was the TF2 items. You couldn't get those on the 360 release. Probably didn't help that the Xbox version was rushed and bugged either, but we'll come back to that. 2 days later, it would see a Steam release, a further 4 days, and it was on PlayStation. And then about a month later, it came out for iOS. Poker Night 2 was clearly a lot less humble than its predecessor, seeking to make bigger waves outside of the TF2 community this time around. Making it a mobile game was perhaps the most telltale sign of this vast ambition. Apologies. Despite that, nobody seems to remember the Apple version. Where Poker Night: The Inventory was a quirky indie classic, its sequel got the AAA treatment. Branching out far and wide to meet consumers on every platform, it would later be unduly constrained by those same distribution agreements only a few years down the line. But despite that, we're back, for a second time at The Inventory, and tonight's tale, it's going to be a long one. So grab your banang, get some drinks from the bar, and make sure to play your cards right. This is the story of Poker Night 2. Being in the midst of moving offices, working on another Poker Night seemed like a straightforward choice. Technically speaking, it's simple enough, since the base engine and the poker mechanics were already set and ready to go. Now that Telltale was pioneering the world of interactive drama, it wouldn't be such a good idea to begin another big, dramatic project during the transitory period. The Poker Night series offered something low stakes with regards to development. A casual game with no overarching plot, where the only big decisions are folding and raising. Thankfully, I managed to speak to some of the Telltale staff about the game's development over the course of a few emails. Here's Nick Herman, the director for Poker Night 2, on his more relaxed responsibilities.
The team on the sequel was maybe double what it was in the original, and there were a lot of newer folks at Telltale cutting their teeth on the project. I spent my time designing the camera and animation systems, while also directing the voice, cinematic, and animation content itself. As far as the responsibilities for directing the game goes, it was extremely light compared to something like Wolf or Tales from the Borderlands.
That didn't mean it wasn't without troubles, though. The animation work, while not overly complex, took up a good bulk of time due to the spontaneous nature of the game. According to Herman,
this may be the most technically complex game we did at Telltale. One of the constraints of the game was these dialogue lines that could fire at any point in a poker game, which meant you couldn't animate their neck and eyes, since where they're looking at is driven by the underlying systems. I can't remember exactly how we handled this, but I'm pretty sure we had to have 2 sets of animations, one for each state, effectively doubling all the work you had to do for each character.
Games like this allowed a lot of the new staff to get more experience with the Telltale tool, the engine that all of their works have been built upon so far. And it was a pretty good time to get professionally reacquainted with something a little bit more low-key. Telltale was a lot more famous now, and many eyes were keenly watching. But that surely means a lot of added pressure when it comes to acquiring multiple equally famous IPs who are all happy to be portrayed alongside each other. Then getting their voice actors to say all the lines, plus all that dialogue to write. Dialogue that honours the home turf of each franchise. It's not an easy task, by any means. Speaking to Polygon, Telltale's VP of Publishing, Steve Allison, said it best. This sort of thing just comes naturally to Telltale, like a happy little accident in a Bob Ross painting.
Licensed games aren't a rarity, but games featuring multiple and unrelated franchises certainly are. It's a formula so arcane that we discovered it more or less unwittingly. It's kind of a happy accident that Poker Night even exists. People came for the hats and stayed for the poker.
Before 2013, they'd only tried that formula once, but they had a blast doing it. It was a trip down memory lane for staff, with a LucasArts Legacy act on the left and resident PAX ambassador on the right. What they'd learned though is that the studio had a collective natural talent for mixing these otherwise distant characters together. It seemed like the right time to try that formula again.
I've got your ass kicked preemptively.
Character selection for the first Poker Night was a random, organic experience, Allison explained. The team ended up deciding on characters from companies Telltale had worked with in the past. But just like casting a motion picture, the creative team had to make sure its characters worked well together.
To resolve potential tensions between the properties at the poker table, Mike STEMMLE reprised his role as lead writer for the project. Here's what he had to say on healthy character interactions.
Ease of writing individual characters rarely entered into the equation, because our egos are just that big. But we did try to keep an eye on character balance. Too many alpha males or straight men or wacky guys at the table, and you suddenly find yourself in a lot of odd man out situations where one character is constantly being excluded from the conversation.
Where STEMMLE was working on some of the most memorable video game writing to date, Allison was making sure those licenses would actually show up on time. Rather than pursuing the past though, Telltale wanted to get some fresh faces and in-house favourites. As such, some of their prime targets came from the big screen. Everyone at Telltale loved the Venture Brothers, so Allison pursued Cartoon Network to make that collaboration happen. Reviving an old, long-standing connection with MGM, the timing was ideal to cross-promote The Evil Dead ahead of its soft reboot that same year. Other licenses didn't have to be hunted though, and again arose organically. Our dog on the right is an in-house special, of course, whereas the robots at the table already had a vested interest in appearing. Valve was eager to stimulate their hat economy once again, whilst cross-promoting their semi-recent success story, Portal 2. Gearbox, on the other hand, were a little more direct.
We have good friends at Gearbox who basically said, if you guys ever do Poker Night 2, we want to be in. So once we knew about it, we gave Dave Eddings and Randy Pitchford a call, and they gave a very enthusiastic yeah with an F in front of it. That was very easy to put together.
With all the licenses in place, and a killer writing team to boot, it was only a matter of time before Poker Night 2 hit the shelves. And it was only a matter of time before we went back to the inventory once more to visit an all-new cast of characters. The very first player we see down there? None other than Brock Samson.
Good game. Let's do it again sometime.
Our first ever introduction to Brock in the series is, funnily enough, in the middle of a poker game. One of the very first Venture Brothers characters we see, and one of the last we'd ever forget. Brock is your archetypal machismo man, the loyal bodyguard who's always ready for a slice of the action. Working for the eponymous Dr. Thaddeus Rusty Venture, mainly trying to protect his kids, Hank and Dean, Brock acts as a sort of stand-in uncle figure for the family, as he reveals in conversation with Ash Williams.
Hey Brock, what's it like raising kids?
Why are you asking me?
I've heard the stories. You're practically a co-dad for those Venture boys.
I prefer to think of it as being a live-in uncle that gets paid to kill people. You thinking of raising a family?
Assuming my swimmers haven't been cursed by demons, yeah. You think it's a good idea?
I don't know. On the one hand, Hank and Dean are two of the biggest pains in the asses I've ever had to put up with in my entire ass-pained life.
But?
Yeah, but every now and then they do something spectacularly not lame that surprises the hell out of me. It's the damnedest thing.
Before the Venture Bros existed, series co-creator Jackson Public was working on a different trope-steeped superhero, the Tick.
Wicked men, you face the Tick.
A big blue bug famous for his signature sense of complete obliviousness, Public got his first foray into television by working on the Tick's adaptation into a sitcom for Fox, where none other than Patrick Warburton played the role of the main character.
Arthur! Arthur! Hello again! Your door is broken, the knob came off.
The show only went on for one season, but this was clearly enough for Public and Warburton to become well acquainted. Once Adult Swim picked up the Venture Bros, Patrick was quickly cast to fill the role of Rusty's bodyguard. Made as a parody of pro wrestler Sid Eudy, the Brock Fitzgerald Samson we know today was born in Omaha to a single mother. He's part Swedish, part Polish, part Winnebago, and part Ash's distant relative, according to the Poker Night lore.
Perhaps I can help. Scanning. Scanning. Sheila, the very pregnant daughter of Eufred, married to Theodore in 1300.
Pregnant? Hey man, we only did it once. Twice tops.
1 son, 8 grandchildren, killed by the Black Plague in 1347, along with all but one of her heirs.
Aw, damn.
Direct descendants emigrate to Poland in the 15th century.
Hey, fellow Pole. Grataluce.
Remaining family escapes Nazis in mid-20th century, eventually settling in a Swedish enclave in Nebraska.
Wait a minute.
By the 1960s, the sole surviving ancestor of Theodore and Sheila, Bonnie Jablonski, briefly marries a local traveling salesman, giving birth to 2 male sons, including Brock Fitzgerald Sampson.
Ah, son of a bitch.
Hey, welcome to the family.
Brock famously never uses a gun, instead opting for his signature Bowie knife, which TF2 dubs the Samson Skewer. That means his tussles are always one-on-one, mano-y-mano, which make for exciting action in the series, and always make you a little bit worried, since there's no telling when he'll lash out at you.
Cool hand, Skywalker!
But much more is to be said about his voice actor, who many Telltale fans thought they'd already heard in a previous title.
You know, Brock, you remind me of someone.
Well, I get that a lot. People say I talk like some guy they saw on television.
No, it's not that. Sal!
Sal?
Sal, the giant talking cockroach. Hell of a guy, Sal. You would have liked him.
Oh, he's dead?
He gave his life to save the city from my partner's superego.
Superego. Right.
Indeed, both Sam and his fans are mistaken, but not too far from the truth. Better known for his portrayal of Killer Bean, voice actor Vegas E. Tripp was the guy who actually played the role of Sal, but he drew extensive inspiration from Warburton to get the voice for the cockroach just right.
Nice headphones. Listening to the game? Or maybe some Black Flag?
No, these are my official Museum Guard emergency headphones. I gotta wear these so that Mr. Paperweight can tell me where to go in case of a security emergency. Of course, I haven't heard from him in a while. He must be busy up there with that space gorilla guy.
He too is a bodyguard, working across the Maxverse for various antagonists in Sam & Max Season 3. He's a guy you have to appease semi-regularly, but otherwise, a pretty chill dude. No need for a Warburton impression this time around, they had the real deal. Once Telltale got their hands on his voice, the staff quickly found that he was a favourite of theirs. In the email interviews I managed to have with some of the Telltale staff, they only had great things to say about the guy. Here's lead writer Mike STEMMLE on that.
While all the actors on PN2, indeed every game I worked on at Telltale, were consummate professionals, Warburton was a rock star. Besides having read the script from top to bottom and having multiple solid takes for every line, the guy actually came to the booth with additional gags. That joke about Barbra Streisand? All Warburton.
That's what I call a Barbra Streisand. Ugly, but still working.
The guy rocks.
Indeed, for some developers, Warburton provided their best memory of the project. For Nick Herman, the director for Poker Night 2, perhaps the only vivid memory.
I have almost no recollection of working on Poker Night 2, but I remember being in the booth with Patrick, but probably mainly because I got a picture taken with him, and now it's a memory of a memory, you know?
Cartoon Network's decision to get involved with Poker Night 2 was likely a strategic one, a manner of announcing to all that a new season of their Adult Swim favourite was soon to be released. Their feature in the game landed them some sweet deals soon after. It didn't take long for Valve to take an interest in the show, and before long they were working with Adult Swim to create a line of cosmetics related to the Venture Brothers, alongside the pre-existing skewer. These were officially announced in a promo advert after the premiere of VB Season 5, which makes for a slightly surreal watch. As for a more fully fledged collaboration with Telltale, such a project, perhaps surprisingly, never came to fruition. While the storytelling studio was pretty big on the series, they never approached its creators directly with regards to a potential video game. According to a 2013 panel with Jackson Public and Doc Hammer appearing alongside Warburton, our star in question, it's not an opportunity they've really been asked to explore.
I was wondering if there's any potential future for a full Venture Brother game with Telltale Games.
One game company would have to come to us and go, hey, we want to do that. Like, nobody's ever brought that up.
Yeah, Rockstar Games would have to go, you want to make a Venture Brothers game? And Jackson would go like, now! That's how it works.
Can Brock kill hookers in it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ah!
However, Warburton was invited back to Telltale once again to work on Tales from the Borderlands as antagonistic and secretly incompetent boss Hugo Vasquez. He's not around for too long, but he effectively sets the hierarchical tone for the whole show.
This is a prototype, the most advanced gun Hyperion has ever made. Any last words?
It might seem hard to believe, but Poker Night 2 is the only time Brock has ever appeared in a video game. There was, however, probably no better place for him than inside the inventory. His character development continued here, in conversation with 2 robots and a talking dog. Nicholas Straub, writing for Screen Rant, concurs with a great explanation on why Brock's feature is so fitting.
One of the best elements of Venture Brothers was how the series took caricatures, challenged them by showing them their blind spots, and then gave them room to grow. Just as Poker Night 2 expertly shows, Brock is terrified of seeming vulnerable, in keeping with his stereotype. And yet, much of the series is about Brock coming to openly care about the family he protects, even if he is uncomfortable admitting it.
Oh, I'm never gonna hear the end of this. Go Team Venture.
Unfortunately, the Venture Bros last season was released the same year that Poker Night 2 was delisted. The series was officially cancelled in 2020, and a year later it became clear that the new Telltale staff had no intentions to bring back his only video game crossover. Brock, of course, has now returned in the new Venture Brothers film, Radiant is the Blood of the Baboon Heart, so perhaps this ending is not as poetic as we once thought it was. But regardless, this film is probably the last we'll be seeing of our resident strong and silent type. To his left, however, we have a character who might be described as the weak and loud type.
Hey! I just had a great idea! You should totally ditch those Venture losers and bodyguard for me!
I think you need a reboot there, Twiki.
That'll be great! You can escort me across the deadly planet of Pandora as I complete my epic quest for power, glory, and badass weaponry!
Give it a rest, Pinocchio.
Oh, come on! What can that Doc Venture guy give you that I can't?
How about a voice that doesn't make me want to rip his arms out of his sockets?
Touché!
Claptrap, as we all know, originated in the 1730s, a word referring to pointless filler gags used to incite an easy round of applause on stage. But the Pandoran AI, the CL4P-TP general purpose robot, was created by Lawrence DeQuitt, co-founder of in-game firearms company Hyperion. DeQuitt's department was experimental robotics, and one of his later projects was the CL4P-TP line. While they appear disarming, they are very much a feat of engineering, but they're famously unfinished.
What's going on with the toaster?
His audio output is caught in a loop. It happens sometimes with low-cost sound cards.
Should I do anything?
A swift blow to the head wouldn't kill. But it probably wouldn't help either.
Aw, jeez.
Movies! Hey! What did I miss?
Their AI suffered from what we might generously call personality quirks, but what others have often dubbed a tendency to cause serious annoyance. The Claptrap we meet, known as Claptrap P. Claptrappington, was never meant to be particularly noteworthy. His creator, concept artist Lauren Wood, was between projects at the time, and dropped in artwork for a character he conceived elsewhere into the Gearbox databases as a throwaway joke. The art director for Borderlands, Brian Martell, ended up being a big fan of Zippy, Claptrap's pre-dev name, and further concept work was done to bring him to life. Even after being saved from the beta bins, Claptrap was not initially planned to be a staple of the brand. However, he ended up playing a crucial role in the success of the franchise.
That's what you get when you screw with the cloud!
There was probably a better way to phrase that.
Having got back from E3 2008 with a 75% finished game, testers accused Gearbox's new work of being too copycat. It was often reported that the whole experience felt too similar to Bethesda's Fallout 3, and id Software's in development yet keenly anticipated Rage. Borderlands' graphics went for a gritty realism, but combined with its overly explosive boss fights and odd movement mechanics, it ended up with a confused identity that would really struggle to stand out in the competitive world of first-person shooters. Unable to spare much expense and working to short deadlines, the team quickly revised the graphics to create its now signature art style that we all know it for today. Unexpectedly carrying the weight of bringing that whole comic feel to life, David Eddings as CLAPTRAP cultivated a kind of comedy relief that really helped sell the broader atmosphere. He was just meant to be the little tutorial helper who told you about new missions and guided you through the beginning, but CLAPTRAP ended up being the inadvertent star of the show with his quirky antics. Beatboxing, rhetorically questioning, and desperately seeking affirmations from anyone who might listen, Eddings' performance as CLAPTRAP was so memorable that he became a prime feature of the sequel.
Farewell, traveler, and be sure to say hello to all the friendly claptraps that await you on Pandora. I shall now continue my fascinating research on the wondrous properties of sand.
We meet CLAPTRAP for a second time in Windshear Waste, digging out corpses from the train wreck. He seems full of glee, but as he soon lets us know, he's just programmed to sound happy.
If I sound pleased about this, it's only because my programmers made this my default tone of voice. I'm actually quite depressed.
Living in a snowy den full of old, deactivated CL4P TP units, CLAPTRAP is the last remaining robot of his kind, on a mission to take down Handsome Jack and hopefully make a few friends on the way. He quickly cemented his place as Borderlands' tragic jester. Everyone who runs into him seems to hate his guts, and the only pleasure they can derive from his existence is by subjecting him to torture.
Really bad. But CLAPTRAP, you're a robot. Are you even capable of feeling pain? Well, no, I guess I'm not. So, following you makes us feel good and doesn't hurt you. So there's no harm in us continuing to do it, right? Actually, now that I've talked it all out, I think you guys have some moral high ground here.
It's no surprise that he's keen to be at the poker table. He's been preparing, actually. His Wastelands den already has a game going, albeit one with deactivated participants. CLAPTRAP was like Marmite. People either loved him or hated him, but there was no denying that his character was an inviolable part of Borderlands 2.
CLAPTRAP steals the blinds.
That was like taking candy from a baby. Which on Pandora is really hard, because they're all armed to the teeth that they don't have yet.
CLAPTRAP became so iconic that he even won an award, and Samuel L. Jackson gave it to him.
The people have spoken. Let's see who you voted to be your VGA 10 Character of the Year.
Character of the Year? Wow! I really don't know who to thank first.
Indeed, that award would be his bounty in Poker Night 2, and as we also know, CLAPTRAP was in good company that year, 2012, the year that Telltale swept the video game award floors. Both at the height of video game fame, perhaps a collaboration between the studios was inevitable. Poker Night 2 was a mutually beneficial commercial success for both Gearbox and Telltale, but the relationship didn't stop at a CLAPTRAP cameo.
Telltale, you guys were both on stage last year at the VGAs, winning a lot of awards, and now you guys are teaming up. So tell us, how did this collaboration come about, Randy?
Well, these guys are awesome. I mean, Telltale makes, in my opinion, the best story-driven games in the world.
Gearbox had created a whole intricate world to explore and had developed upon it extensively in Borderlands 2. But their focus on looting and shooting meant that the story would often have to take a back seat for guarantees of gruesome gameplay. Having had many a conversation during the Spike Game Awards, and seeing the fantastic ways in which Telltale could handle their de facto mascot, an experience focused solely on Pandoran world building was a job only Telltale could truly do justice. The companies ended up making an in-universe adventure game together, releasing Tales from the Borderlands only a year later to stellar reviews.
A lot of people know that Gearbox had actually worked with Telltale before with Poker Night at the Inventory too. And we found it was fun to work together, and we really enjoyed that interaction and that collaboration.
The Telltale guys were saying, this is cool, this is a neat, rich universe, this is like a place we'd like to play.
We thought these guys could do something really awesome with the game. And so like the idea of doing an adventure-style game with the Borderlands franchise just seemed to be a natural fit.
Tales follows the story of a recently demoted Hyperion employee and his budding entourage, beginning as free regular co-workers before some Pandoran scammers get in their way. Connected by a pursuit for a vault key, as seemingly everyone is, the story is one of tense, distrustful relationships and the bizarre evils of corporate greed. The digitized ghost of Handsome Jack returns to haunt and taunt main character Reese, in a slower-paced environment where we can see more of the antagonist's nuances. Telltale developed the world of Borderlands exponentially, giving its atmosphere a new lease of life in a setting once revolving around skags and bandits. And this game probably wouldn't have happened had it not been for CLAPTRAP's poker cameo a year prior. Warburton certainly wouldn't have been involved without it.
I'll let you know when I need my trash can emptied.
The rebooted Telltale was rumoured to be working on a sequel in early 2020, but this never came to fruition. Instead, it was Gearbox who took back their Telltale title and created new Tales from the Borderlands in late 2022. It was released to mixed reviews, tipping into the negative. Fans were not happy with the way Reese was rewritten, essentially undoing his development by turning him into a sort of corporate overlord. He only really makes a brief cameo to get the plot moving for the game's new protagonist, Anu. After that point, the writing is left wanting for that Telltale touch, introducing some iconic side characters but otherwise delivering a lackluster plot. New Tales also lacks an appearance from our character in question, CLAPTRAP. He does appear briefly in the original 2014 title towards the end. You can hire him to fight the Traveller to gain access to the vault, provided you have $9 million just lying around. He's hardly cheap, but his company is invaluable, and he does ultimately prove himself to be an effective asset.
So, that's the key to it, huh? You just get a crazy big robot to kill the vault monster. We've been wrong the whole time.
CLAPTRAP's most notable connection is with the table's dealer, GLaDOS. An unlikely relationship for sure, their robot chatter deviates from the binary to the flirtatious every once in a while.
What's this emotion I'm feeling? It's like I wish I had those cards, but I also hate you for having them.
That's envy, you emotionally stunted rhomboid.
And now I'm learning arousal.
Left behind in the game files, there is a whole load of dialogue lying around, in which a full-fledged relationship develops. CLAPTRAP leaves his stuff over at the test chambers quite often, it seems.
Babe, CLAPTRAP.
Yes, Schnookums?
You left the victory lift up in test chamber 17 last night. Again.
Oh, yeah. Sorry about that.
Are you sorry about the 15 test subjects that escaped the facilities, too?
Speaking of which, we should probably discuss the new dealer at the table, along with her dry witticisms. A new and unexpected feature in Poker Night 2, Telltale decided to dip back into Valve's backpack and implement a whole new role. While there was some discussion about gunning for another TF2 merc, Portal 2 had more recently been cemented as a Valve classic, making major waves in the gaming space. Given the iconicity of its main antagonist, and given how good she would be at insulting the player, the introduction of GLaDOS was seemingly a perfect fit for the inventory.
The player has busted out and must leave the table before everyone starts laughing.
While Portal is now one of Valve's most successful and iconic franchises, second only perhaps to Half-Life, GLaDOS was not always a planned part of the show. Her origin can be credited in part to Psychonauts, oddly enough. Eric Walpole, one of the writers for Portal, had worked with Double Fine on the Xbox Classic previously, and while writing voice lines for that game, Walpole ran around the offices looking for someone to record temporary versions of his written dialogue before replacing it with a professional rendition. He eventually ran out of fellow co-workers using text-to-speech generators for the remaining lines, a technique that proved to be accidentally amusing, and to his partial disdain, often sounded funnier than some of his written work. Moving on to production for Portal, Walpole was struggling to bring a narrative together. Initially, Valve had ambitious plans to bring in a great deal of other human characters to test the to-be protagonist shell, but this would involve a lot of choreography and animation work that the studio simply didn't have time for. Walpole was holding up for the ideal situation to reuse his text-to-speech characters in another environment, and this was it. Down the cold, empty corridors of Aperture Laboratories, a seemingly disembodied text-to-speech voice guiding the players through the game gave playtesters a renewed sense of purpose. Feeling attached to their new robotic compatriot, it felt like the tests they were doing had real meaning.
Since the installation of my new morality core, I've lost all interest in killing. Now I only crave science.
The speech generator did not last forever though, eventually being replaced by Orange Box extraordinaire Ellen McLean. Her voice was then roboticized, and GLaDOS went for about a dozen different design concepts before the team finally settled on the hanging robot that we all know today.
No further compliance information is required or will be provided, and you are an excellent test subject.
The actual in-game lore for GLaDOS was extensively developed in the more recent installment of the series. It's revealed that she was once Caroline, an assistant to Aperture Science's CEO Cave Johnson. She became the unwitting victim of the genetic lifeform and disk operating system, the GLaDOS project, for which Cave was the original subject in an effort to extend his own life. It was built too late for the boss though, and the gift of eternal AI life was given to his right-hand woman instead. She was programmed with an itch, an addiction for continuous testing, to test any and all remaining subjects within the labs and to record the results no matter how futile such an effort may be. Presumably she also has a penchant for poker, testing tonight's arrivals at the inventory with cards rather than portals. There were a few more ideas Telltale had in store for GLaDOS which ultimately went unused, the most interesting and elusive of these being the lost experiments she would initiate. There are some leftover voice lines which imply that GLaDOS had a different role, perhaps not as dealer, but as a researcher in the game, holding 5 different experiments which, upon their success, would give the player a kind of bonus. While it's not firmly known why these lines went unused, it is most likely that this idea was simply rehashed into the old bounty system of the previous game. 5 experiments, 5 characters, 5 bounties, hardly out of the question, although there is some discussion about multiplying the player's payout too. Given the prospective discussions GLaDOS has with the player, it may have been for the best that this system was ultimately cut. In one scenario, she seemingly distracts the player with disconcerting images, and in another, she claims you may feel a touch of extreme vertigo.
You can't send me back. She's planning things, man. Big things.
Oh, stop.
The biggest criticism of GLaDOS, and perhaps the biggest criticism of the whole game, was the inability to skip her dialogues. While at first her quips about your subpar intelligence are fittingly amusing, they don't seem so natural after the 10th time you've heard them.
Well, that was a clever move that won't come back to bite you in your ample posterior.
Indeed, GLaDOS is not the only part human, part cyborg at the inventory tonight. Third from the left, with a robotic arm to boot, we have Ashley J. Williams of Evil Dead fame. Unfortunately for him, the AI dealer never seems to give him good cards.
You're killing me here, GLaDOS.
If I were actually killing you, there would be a lot more screaming and irony.
By far the oldest IP at the poker table, the Evil Dead franchise was originally conceived in 1979 when prospective director Sam Raimi created Within the Woods, a proof-of-concept film made on a $1,600 budget. The film's to-be protagonist Bruce, played by Bruce Campbell, dies early doors and is then possessed by the Book of the Dead. Under the spell of a Kandarian demon, he terrorizes his friends for a full 15 minutes, although the low-budget special effects might be quite hard to appreciate on this VHS version I found. At this point, we're not talking about the most creative character. Bruce is just his given name. But once Raimi got funding for a full feature-length film, the iconic Ash Williams we all know today was born.
Oh, you bastards! Why are you torturing me like this? Why?
Perhaps the most rebooted franchise of all time, The Evil Dead was released in 1981 and went on to become a renowned cult classic. This time around, Bruce avoided possession. Ash Williams would instead take on the role of a lone survivor. One by one, his friends fall victim to the incantations of the Necronomicon. The scenes were eerie and the scares were plentiful, and who could forget that cringe-inducing pencil stab? I'm not going to show it though, it's really gross. In what has been dubbed as a requel 6 years later, Evil Dead 2 picked up Ash's story once more, taking the frights to a whole new level. So high up that they somehow looped into comedic genius. Audiences were taken aback by many a jump scare, only to find the slapstick that ensued breathtakingly funny. In the final film of the trilogy, Army of Darkness, Ash is sent 1,000 years into the past, and he is a force to be reckoned with. Hardened now to the violence and calamities, Ash must save a medieval civilization from the brink of deadite disaster. By far the funnest film in the whole franchise, Army of Darkness fleshed out Ash's character into the fun-loving, gun-running, all-American force that we know today.
See this? This is my boomstick! The 12-gauge double-barreled Remington. S-Mart's top of the line.
Despite not originating from the world of video games, Ash Williams had a marked impact upon them. As G-Man Lives points out, Duke Nukem 3D borrowed many lines from Ash, some iconic ones at that.
Hail to the king, baby.
Hail to the king, baby.
Yo, she-bitch. Let's go.
Hey, she-bitch, let's go.
But most notably, The Evil Dead was cited as the inspiration for the original Doom games by id Software, and without Doom, the world of first-person shooters would look very different. There may not have even been a Half-Life, and without that, perhaps Valve wouldn't be sitting at the poker table to begin with. So, indirectly, you've got Ash Williams to thank for TF2 hats.
Groovy.
But Ash had a couple of his own titles too. Ignoring the rather bizarre Hotline Miami-esque game for the Commodore 64, there was Hail to the King, Fistful of Boomstick, and Regeneration. G-Man Lives also covers those, but none of them are particularly memorable breakthroughs in the video game world. According to him, they range from fairly weak cash grabs to passable games. Bruce Campbell doesn't really remember them either, as was made clear in his IGN interview.
What is that, some dumb video game?
That's some dumb video game.
Okay,
That
yeah.
was
I'm like, okay.
The Evil Dead
1997 video game.
On the topic of Bruce, it's worth addressing the elephant in the room. He isn't in Poker Night 2. Much to the upset of many Evil Dead fans, the voice of Ash is provided by Danny Weber, an actor most famous for his role in the hit film Birdemic. Yes, that film, the best, worst film that we all know and love. In that, he plays the role of Rick, compatriot of the film's protagonist, Rod. He's most famous for that one chair rocker scene, and then, for whatever reason, plays this otherwise completely unrelated caveman for a gag in the sequel. But you're not here to learn about Danny Weber. We want to know, why wasn't Bruce Campbell in this game? Well, very interestingly, nobody really knows the answer. I asked Mike STEMMLE about this, and even he seemed confused by the situation.
At the time, we were told that Bruce didn't want to play Ash again, which has clearly proven not to be the case. Perhaps it had something to do with the weird tangle of legal rights between Army of the Dead, the license Telltale had, and Evil Dead. Or maybe he just didn't want to do a cheesy video game. It all worked out in the end, although I like to think he would have appreciated the Sam Axe Davy Gunface joke.
Well, I tried using an axe once, but people started calling me Sam Axe, which really confused the heck out of Max.
Stupid homonyms.
Sam Axe. Might as well call yourself Davy Gunface.
The 2013 reboot of The Evil Dead didn't actually star Ash as a main character, even if he was included in a post-credits cameo. Actually voicing Ash in a cross-promotional game would probably get Evil Dead fans overhyped for what would come next, when, in reality, Campbell had no firm plans for the character at the time. But despite that, Ash did return for the 2015 show Ash vs. Evil Dead, picking up where the original trilogy left off.
Yo, Granny. Let's go.
Campbell himself seems a little iffy about video game culture. When Evil Dead the Game was announced, Game Informer did an interview with Bruce, asking the age-old question.
When is Ash Williams coming to Fortnite?
Nah, he doesn't need Fortnite.
But 6 months later, Ash is in Fortnite. Guess he changed his mind, or got some good money from Epic Games. Point being, he's quite flippant about video games as a medium. He was quite vague when asked about Poker Night on Twitter, pretty much just stating that he didn't do it, with no explanation as to why not. The most common theory is that Campbell was just busy, prioritizing the tour to promote his new film ahead of anything else. Given the schedule for the Evil Dead's reboot, this seems pretty likely. Things just didn't line up, but the show had to go on. It still remains a complete mystery as to why Danny Weber, specifically, ended up filling the role. But what we do know is that he divided opinion. Some fans thought the difference was very obvious and were highly disappointed by Bruce's absence, while others thought he did a great job in an otherwise difficult, unique role. One thing we know for sure though, is that Ash is a big fan of wearing shoes. His next door neighbor Sam, not so much.
How do you get through all your crazy adventures without any shoes?
Same way you get through yours without a hat.
But I don't need a hat.
Exactly.
That's not really an answer.
Isn't it?
No, it's not.
And that's why I don't wear shoes.
And also because shoes make him look like a big brown clown.
To Ashley's left is a talking dog, a dog playing poker. It's Sam, Telltale's famed freelance policer. He's accompanied by returning icon Max, and their hijinks here are as funny as they are anywhere else. Unlike his recurring compatriot though, Sam has a fairly cool air about him, almost taking the place of the straight man at the table, accepting his oddly specific anecdotes.
What's it like living in black and white?
Well, that's actually an old wives' tale, like the one about representative democracy. Dogs can see in color. It just looks like this.
Whoa! I am totally tripping balls right now.
We can also see fear and smell sarcasm.
Ooh, impressive.
All in.
Hey, it works!
Sam was a welcome addition for longtime Telltale fans. Where once Monkey Island references had felt retro, Sam and Max were now slipping into the role of old-school cult classic comfort come 2013.
Winning streaks are like dating a beautiful woman. Enjoy them while you can, because it's only a matter of time before they dump you for being weird and clingy.
Thankfully, he had freshened up for his latest cameo, getting a whole new model and a nice, shiny nose, making reference to the old Percellian roots of the Sam and Max comics. Dipping back into their own catalogues for the final character, there were a lot of choices Telltale could have made. Puzzle Agent, Back to the Future, The Walking Dead, of course. Some of them they nearly went for, but Sam won out in the end. He was the de facto mascot of the company for a long time, summing up the whole ethos of Telltale with his adventure game meta quirkiness always coming to the fore, yet staying grounded as a very likeable, dynamic protagonist. It's certainly been a while since he was on screen though. His last official appearance had been 3 years ago in Sam & Max The Devil's Playhouse. A time-bending, reality-warping frenzy of a game, Sam soon became the prime focus of the title. When Max's brain is stolen, we see a whole new side to an otherwise disarming dog.
The plot is about Max. What happens to Max, what events Max causes, what trouble Max gets into, etc, etc. But the emotional core of Season 3 is all on Sam. What does Sam go through? How does losing Max impact him, etc.? In that way, the real story, the heart of the story, feels to me like it belongs to Sam, and that's pretty cool.
Once the third season kickstarts its thicker, rawer emotional plotline as Max's brain is stolen, we see a kind of intensely entertaining writing that I'm not sure could even exist anywhere else. On the edge of our seats trying to solve a stereotypical noir mystery, uncertain of who to accuse and what tactics to use, the 4-piece writing team still found plenty of time to be funny without spoiling the otherwise bleak atmosphere.
You are aware that my ultra-dense space gorilla hide renders me impervious to your puny Earth bullets, right?
Oh yeah, I forgot. Where were we?
Telltale's ability to straddle genres at such a brisk pace gave their beloved characters a newfound sense of meaning. The Devil's Playhouse was an adventure fans would never forget, and there were few things Telltale couldn't do with these two. Aside from questioning the closest continua theory of identity, the freelance police were also put on a train with a blood-sucking elf, transported into a quasi-Egyptian version of their home turf, and forced to give a winning lottery ticket to a guy who hates their guts. Few adventure games have quite as much range as this one, and the genre as a whole is already infamous for its varied oddities.
I sure hope those psychic powers aren't a danger to the people you work on or around, Max.
Whenever I use them, it feels like somebody's microwaving a radar gun near a high-tension wire in my skull.
It's a good thing neither of us is legally, morally, or ethically allowed to reproduce.
Ahead of anything else though, longtime fans thought this cameo was proof enough of a new Sam & Max game in the pipeline. Having been neglected while big AAA names take the cake, it finally looked like Telltale was serious about revisiting their roots, but those fans were of course quite sorely disappointed.
We love Sam and Max and certainly haven't forgotten about them. I think you'll see something smaller, more like poker than a full season, and probably not for a bit, but we have not forgotten about them. We've just been super busy growing like crazy.
Fans have been surviving off of very limited news and only fairly vague promises from Telltale. In the meantime, they had to make their own fun. During the month of Poker Night 2's release, a community-led effort called Project Hivemind was put up on Telltale's own forums. It was a collaborative, unofficial attempt to make Sam & Max Season 4 into a reality, but it was ultimately wrapped up when it was around 70% finished. Perhaps Sam's shoes were too big to fill. Metaphorically, I mean, since he never wears shoes. In the meantime, the long wait amongst old-school fans turned into a sense of desperation, but there was little that the community could do to push for another game, besides singing the praises of the older titles and emphasizing a sense of obligation.
Sam & Max's appearances in Poker Night 2 better not be it for the freelance police. I hope something good happens at Comic-Con 2013. I'm psyched for Season 4. I'm not exactly sure how popular / successful Sam & Max is as a series, but I, after playing Season 3 Episode 5, knew that a 4th season is inevitable. Man, that episode truly felt like it would go on forever before abruptly ending. Season 4, it is being made right now. I can feel it. How about we start a movement to get Telltale to drop Sam & Max and let someone who cares about the franchise to pick up the torch? Surely there are many game companies who could do the franchise right by another game. Have some integrity and respect for the fans that kept you running until you decided to kick Sam & Max fans in the nuts.
The rights to the franchise were never sold, not until Telltale went bust 5 years down the line. It was then reacquired by some ex-TTG alumni, founding a small company called Skunk-Carpe Games, dedicated to the preservation of the crime fighters. Those who had been waiting for what felt like a half-life got what they needed. Not only did the new studio remaster some of the classics, they also played a part in the release of a whole new game. Sam & Max? This time it's virtual. It might be described as too little too late for the duo though. Outsourced to development studio Happy Giant, the pair were back, but not in the form that anyone had expected. While critics enjoyed their antics and the humour, the community that had waited so long, well, most of them didn't play it. Virtual reality was a really odd medium to release on for an adventure classic, which many fans were simply not ready for. It stands today on Steam with 75 reviews, totaling a mixed rating. While negative reviewers want to love it, they cite its clunky puzzles and overall bugginess as its biggest obstacle.
That was the commissioner. or possibly someone wearing a commissioner skin suit, telling us that strange unspeakable things are afoot at the neighborhood Nutrahole.
But that's where I get all my homeopathic needs met!
Come on, Cadet. It's time to take out the organic trash.
With impunity.
Moving back in time, Sam and Max provided an awkward situation for Telltale. While their adventure format was fun, tried and tested, it was becoming clear that it was of a bygone era, played only by gamers more willing to put up with the point-and-click frustrations of the past. Telltale's speedy evolution left little room for the dog and rabbit. They were making more fast-paced, interactive choice-based games now, for a much broader and more casual audience. The studio wasn't just raking in the money, but immense praise and fame, hailed as genuine innovators in the video game world. While Sam and Max may have kickstarted that, unfortunately they were not the IP that the industry had eyes on. The PokerNight series served as a way to say thanks, at least, to the dynamic duo. In much the same way Winslow's appearance is a gratuitous nod to their LucasArts classic, Monkey Island. Fortunately, Mike Stemmle decided to pack the sequel full of goodies to keep those old fans very entertained, and he definitely did not disappoint in that department. Stemmle reused an old story from the cancelled LucasArts title, Sam and Max Freelance Police, better known as the Zyzobia plot. A reworked synopsis of the game's lore is discussed across 5 separate in-game conversations.
If I had $1 for every time Max has been the focal figure of an apocalyptic doomsday cult, internet virus, or ancient prophecy, I wouldn't be gambling away my jerky money tonight.
And that's not all. When working for LucasArts, Stemmle also wrote a song for the game while doing jury service, and that's included here. Yes, that's the Hit the Road song you hear, the whole table singing along to when they feel so inclined.
From coast to coast, they track their bemanged prey.
A pile of foes they leave in their wake.
Woe to fools who dare to get in their way.
If they had known you were coming, they probably wouldn't have baked you a cake.
And so begins our gruesome tale.
Do not pass go, go directly to jail.
The Bigfoot waits in his stinky abode.
When Sam and Max
make some tracks.
When Sam and Max
hit the road.
Okay, that was weird.
Yet strangely nostalgic.
The co-designers gently suggested leaving the music writing to the composers, and so it came to pass that the love theme from Sam and Max Hit the Road was shelved. Until today. Or maybe that's all a lie. Writers lie.
Speaking of Stemmle, let's talk about him for a little while. He was really at the heart of the whole PokerNight operation, writing the lines that millions have watched and rewatched time and time again on YouTube. Stemmle had a tough job though, bringing otherwise disparate characters together and paying homage to the intricate lore behind each one. Thankfully, he had plenty to say about the writing process and the balancing act in his Polygon interview.
Although I reacquainted myself with the source material a lot, I also cheated. The Borderlands and Venture Brothers fan wikis are in freaking sane. Once you've gotten in the habit of maintaining the true voice for a licensed character, the hard part, it's not that hard to get them interacting. The tricky part is finding things for them to talk about. What sort of topics can all 4 of them have in common besides, weirdly, zombies?
Thankfully, and like last time, the companies were pretty hands-off when it came to most of their characters, giving Stemmle plenty of space to breathe new life into these franchises. Most of the restrictions on potential interactions were actually set by Telltale themselves.
I had umpteen scads of creative freedom, all things considered, but there were a few rules we tried to adhere to internally, like keeping the metatextual humor to a minimum, trying not to insult the player too much and stuff like that. But otherwise, I was given free rein to let the characters babble about whatever popped into my caffeine-addled mind.
As alluded to elsewhere, I managed to ask Mike Stemmle a couple questions of my own. It seemed like he really enjoyed working on the series, so I asked him if he ever wanted to give it another shot, and whether it would have been a regular staple for Telltale under slightly different circumstances.
PokerNight is a weird beast. A strange melding of a reasonably sophisticated poker trainer and an over-the-top joke-dispensing machine. It really shouldn't work, but when it does, it's quite a lot of fun. If Telltale's initial incarnation had survived, I suspect that we would have released one every few years, cause they were so much fun.
PokerNight was one of the studio's best sellers, even if it didn't establish the same sort of reputation their critically acclaimed series did. But above all for the team, a trip to the inventory provided a much-needed break for some of the staff at Telltale. As covered in our previous installment, Telltale was working to tight deadlines on fairly outdated software, pushing out a huge amount of content for some top-notch clients. A more relaxed setting for a game with fewer critical eyes meant a more relaxed development process. But even Poker Night was not immune to the crunch at the studio.
Crunch was always a constant issue at Telltale, even for the Poker Night games. But truthfully, PN2 was a relative eye of calm in the swirling miasma of chaos at TTG.
Interestingly though, Nick Herman, the director for Poker Night 2, who I also managed to speak with, saw things a little differently. He saw value in the crunch, happy for the experience it gave him, and the amount he learned during his time at the company.
We could always use more time, but I became pretty numb to it by the end. Maybe that's not a good thing, but in my 12 years at Telltale, I shipped something like 42 episodes. And when I think about how most people at other studios would have shipped 3 to 5 games in the same amount of time, I'm grateful for getting that many reps in. There's a lot of value in going from nothing to something over and over again.
STEMMLE also let out a bit of insider information with regards to the regular celebrations the old team participated in. Many of them were pretty big on poker, although he usually took a back seat in that department.
I believe there were some more poker-passionate Telltalers who held quasi-regular poker games, but I never partook, because I'm a bad gambler. The company as a whole did, as I recall, have a casino-themed annual company party one year that coincided with the development of PN2.
Indeed, it was STEMMLE who helped clarify the Bruce Campbell situation. While he had already helped put one mystery to rest, there was still one question that stuck out like a sore thumb. I asked him one last question about our local Lagomorph. And also ditto for Dave Boat voicing Max. Was William Caston occupied with another project?
William Caston was indeed unavailable. We were lucky to get Dave Boat, who does an amazing Caston impression.
This didn't really clear anything up, but perhaps STEMMLE doesn't know the answer either. Very little is known about William Caston, and his most noteworthy IMDb credit is in fact Max himself. You may recall that from the previous documentary, Max has had his fair share of VAs. What you might not know is that Dave Nowlin, the voice actor for Sam in all of his Telltale appearances, auditioned for both the roles of Sam and Max, almost bagging both performances. However, it was not meant to be. Max was instead voiced by 2B Tycho VA Andrew Shakin. He was originally going to voice Max for the entire first season, but could not continue after the first episode due to health reasons. Enter the enigmatic William Caston to fill the role, seemingly out of nowhere, who gave Max the iconic voice we all know today. The mystery of Caston seems to pervade even amongst his voice acting peers. Given how recording sessions at Telltale worked out to align with everyone's schedules, Nowlin only ever really met his co-star in passing. Despite Nowlin's radio show style suggestion to get the group into a bigger control room, the pair were never Sam and Max in the same building. It's tough to say just how much they really knew about each other. It is commonly theorized that Caston was a member of the Telltale team, using a pseudonym for voice work. This is actually quite likely, given that Telltale staff have been known to use multiple names in credit reels. Recall Brendan Q. Ferguson's alter ego, Theodore Dudebreath, from Telltale's first ever poker effort in 2005, a pseudonym that reappeared in 3 later Sam and Max episodes. Given the nature of Shakin's departure, finding someone internally would probably be the quickest and safest bet, rather than another round of speedy casting calls. Regardless, Caston's replacement, Dave Boat, made a highly commendable effort with the character, indeed good enough to get rehired for the VR installment.
Thankfully, Max came to me pretty easily. Initially, the director would take a moment to compare my voice with the original, and that would help lock me in, but I grasped the character pretty quickly, and after a half hour or so, there was no real need to hear it again.
Bizarrely, after about a decade of inactivity, Caston did return to voice various characters in some LEGO animatics, namely the Hidden Side series. In the 2020 film, he plays the role of Douglas, and in the series, he plays some other minor roles too.
Oh, we said I was red to the bone.
Douglas? You really are death-defying!
As noted in a detailed rally of forum posts concerning his identity, there's no clear connection between the producers of the LEGO animatics and the old Telltale staff. At least, none that they could find. Out of respect for Caston's privacy, I won't dig too deep into this hole today. But there's no doubt that Dave Boat does an absolutely stellar job, and he has been fairly well received by fans, many of whom barely even noticed the difference.
Sam has been eliminated.
Are you sure about that? Because I think Max stole one of my chips.
I'm sure.
Geez, Sam, have a little dignity.
Max is far from the only honorary cameo at the inventory. There was a lot more fan service this time around, coming from all different corners of the respective franchises. Probably the most noteworthy is the appearance of Borderlands' Mad Moxie at the bar, taking a break from her usual duties at the Badass Crater. Although you can bring back her iconic sign when the full Borderlands set is enabled. Claptrap's iconic sidekick Steve also appears, equipped with a party bazooka to liven up the festivities.
You know, you could have just asked me to leave.
The very first character we see is from the Sam and Max universe. The occasionally awkward arch-nemesis General Skunkarpe takes a ride with us to the inventory, and his loyal-ish henchman, known only as Sign Spinner, opens the car door for the player. It's nice to see these two here again, both voiced by Roger Jackson, who also takes the role of Winslow once again.
I am Commodore Reginald Van Winslow, retired.
But the more interesting cameos can be found downstairs. We first see The Walking Dead's Doug hauling pizza into a room, giving us a silent nod of approval. We then see the somewhat mysterious waiter from the minor indie sensation Gravity Bone peering out of the door. This cameo appearance can be accredited to Telltale's Jake Rodkin, who knew the composer of the game, Chris Remo, through his game-related podcast Idle Thumbs. Our first introduction to Brock Samson is, of course, quite violent. The bandit leader from Telltale's Walking Dead is thrust into the wall in what appears to be the aftermath of a fight. But they aren't actually engaged in proper combat, they were just in a heated game of Johann Sebastian Joust, a video game that had not even come out yet. It was not completely unheard of though, and was officially released as part of Sports Friends in 2014 for the PlayStation. At the time it was making its rounds in public playtests and was especially prolific at the Penny Arcade Expo, and was well reviewed by Penny Arcade themselves. This may be a very subtle nod, a very subtle nod, to Poker Knight's Tychoian roots.
That's what we're looking for.
Of course, you can't have a computer poker game without computer poker AI. Telltale's in-house programmer Tully Rafferty was back to make sure the second game was up to scratch. There wasn't too much to change, a fully fledged poker engine had already been made, but there was a whole new game mode to add, and 4 new characters to reprogram. Delving into the game files, we can get a good look at each player's stats. Once again, there's 2 values to be aware of here, skill and aggression. The dumbest player of the lot is Ash, and he also happens to be the most aggressive. Ash will often look like he's playing the hottest cards in the world, but all too often he's relying on a Hail Mary bluff. For comparison, he is somehow less intelligent and yet even more aggressive than the overly keen Strongbad from the first game. Ash is usually the first to leave the table.
Well then, guess it's time to slam down a few beers and dream up an excuse for losing all that money.
Brock is a little smarter and only a little less aggressive than Ash. Brock too loves a good bluff, maybe a bit too much. He will regularly sweep up pots early into a round, rarely letting you get past the flop without putting in some serious cash. He's a little reckless, but can be quite the challenge, one-on-one. That's his favourite mode of combat, after all.
Well, I probably wouldn't have done that, but I'm not you.
Sam takes the same seat Tycho once took, and plays a lot like him too. He's the least aggressive of the lot, and is a pretty smart player, leaving aside his insistence that the royal butterfly is in fact a real hand.
It's a good thing you all dropped out. I had a royal butterfly.
That's not a real hand.
Not yet.
It is rare that he'll see each round all the way to the end, but he will often see games all the way through. Once he starts pushing in chips, you know you're up against some formidable cards. The smartest player of the bunch is our resident robot CLAPTRAP. He takes on a similar role to Max in that he has a rather dynamic playstyle, starting out very aggressively before tapering off somewhat. It should come as no surprise that a CL4P TP unit knows best. He's a machine and can number crunch very effectively, but he still doesn't know what you have, and you still don't know what he's thinking, given that he doesn't have a face. As such, CLAPTRAP can be a surprisingly formidable opponent, so don't underestimate him.
It was secretly a ruse all along! I do know what I'm doing!
There's plenty of leftovers to look at too. Listed within both games are an easy and medium difficulty with identical values. Easy was not used in either game, while medium bowed out after the first. This time at the inventory, you're stuck on hard mode, whether you like it or not. Although originally in playtests there were no difficulty settings at all. It was all just down to random dice rolls. Here's Tully Rafferty on what that looked like.
For most of the development time, all the AIs played with the exact same rules. The only difference between them was play order and random die rolls. Yet, when we did our first playtest, people swore to me that certain players would play differently, that Max was more erratic, Tycho was smarter, etc. I'm sure some psychologist has made a career out of this sort of perception bias. I found it fascinating.
Apparently, Rafferty was not the only one working on the AI this time around. Mike STEMMLE was neck deep in the code for Poker Night 2, much to Tully's consternation, putting a long dormant degree to good use.
I seem to recall that the code for the poker sat on the base of the original, although we tweaked the living daylights out of it to make the AIs smarter and to fix some annoying errors from the first game.
In my conversation with him, STEMMLE also noted that the addition of a new game mode didn't provide too much programming trouble.
Oddly, the addition of Omaha didn't cause too many problems, likely on account of the original code being fairly well architected.
It did, however, cause a lot of confusion on the Telltale forums, which Tully Rafferty spent an awful lot of time trying to resolve. Since Poker Night was not pitched towards poker professionals, its primary audience was busy chasing TF2 cosmetics, people were regularly caught out by the rules of Omaha, which Tully spent many hours re-explaining to people online. There were so many complaints in this department that eventually a thread had to be sticky teaching players the actual rules of No Limit Omaha. Even after all his discussions about how the game actually works, Tully Rafferty never put some of the rumours about his code to rest. Many believed that the computer players had access to a sort of god eye and could make moves knowing exactly what you had. This of course was never the case. As Rafferty himself said, there wouldn't be much point in creating a futile poker simulator.
I don't really mind the complaints, but what I don't understand is what possible motivation people think I would have to program the AI to cheat against you. It's not like I win anything when they lose. I am not getting updates on every bad beat someone gets, giggling to myself. It's just poker.
But Mike Stemmle doesn't seem to mind the situation so much. Actually, he kind of revels in it.
I take perverse programming pride in the fact that, to this day, there are people who believe that the AI cheats. That is, looks at the cards of other players. It does not.
Omaha was not the only new addition to the table. One of the more notable new mechanics for the sequel was the addition of tokens. With these you could unlock new chips, felts and decks. But you could also buy some drinks for your fellow players. While ultimately these drinks would just make them play more liberally, there were some pre-release concerns about how drunk they could get, with a discussion on the forums about who would be the worst drunk out of the four. Drunkenness only really had instrumental value for the player though, bringing out more frequent and expressive tells, so you know who's got the good cards and who has the bad ones. Brock is more likely to become intensely frustrated, while Sam does some sad puppy dog eyes. Ash will throw his head back in obvious disappointment, whereas Claptrap, akin to Strongbad before him, remains difficult to read without a human face. Drinks are cheap enough though, so it's worth spending a little to get the cast drunk, and it's quite cool seeing the unique glasses that Moxie delivers them in. And alongside those new drinks, there's new music to boot. Of course, it wouldn't be Poker Night if Jared Emerson Johnson wasn't involved. Known for his deft musical work in the first game, and essentially all of Telltale's titles, Jared returns to deliver even more classics for our second visit to the inventory. And we jump right into it. The menu theme is a bombastic, over-the-top jazzy combination which somehow suits all of the respective characters and has been heard in many a trailer. We're then given something more subtle, a more low-key tune for drinking your first cocktail to while getting settled in.
Friggin' place is like a maze.
Ah, Mr. Sampson, I'd lost track of you for a moment. And you've brought the player! Splendid!
And just like last time, all the franchises get their own covers. First up, the Army of Darkness song, simply titled Prologue. The very first portion of the score we hear in Ash's third film, it marks the beginning of his time-travelling adventure. Beginning with an epic boom, and then turning more mysteriously orchestral, the original song is all focused on pacing. Emerson Johnson decides to take it down a notch though, and gives it a soothing, walking bass line played by Jason Carr. Meanwhile, Jordan Wardlaw's saxophone builds a cool-tempered tension, perfect for the poker table. The next track up for discussion is an iconic one. The fast-moving Venture Brothers theme, No Vacancy. This one is an unmistakable classic. Its sci-fi edge accompanied by a creepy overtone that ends in an instrumental explosion, which quite succinctly and unmistakably tells you that the show is about to start. The Telltalian cover is quite a bit longer than the original track, and its prime feature is returning drummer Jesse Wickman, creating a chaotic but controlled percussive rhythm that deftly carries the spirit of the original tune. Perhaps the most well-known song at the table though is the Borderlands 2 intro song, Short Change Hero. Coming from a band aptly named The Heavy, almost as if it were fate that they would end up at the inventory, this is a track no Borderlands fan could ever forget. And once again, Emerson Johnson does it great justice. Mirroring the singers with solos on both the saxophone and the organ, this track is more akin to the relaxing melodies heard in the first Poker Night game. Real focus on the piano comes out when covering Portal's credit song, Still Alive. There's something so unnatural about a hate-filled robot singing about the value of friendship, but it was a fun treat at the end of the puzzle-filled frenzy that was.
State my satisfaction.
That said, there's something so very natural about watching the cards fly out onto the table and into Claptrap's pincers before he raises you tenfold while Jared's cover plays in the background. Focused primarily on the piano also, we get a more dramatic cover of There She Is, the song that otherwise plays when GLaDOS reboots in Portal 2. While the original is digitally oriented, starting out as seemingly innocent before evolving into something more sinister, its reiterated version begins elusively, sounding more like a noir theme, which we might hear when Sam investigates a high-stakes crime. And yes, Jared Emerson Johnson once again recovers his old work by recreating themes from Sam & Max for this title, too. First on the bill is the War Song from Sam & Max Save the World, a song about the virtues of war, I guess. The War Song is a pretty funny one, but takes on a whole new form when played at the poker table. Much calmer and subtler than its predecessor, Jared's new cover is a light and refreshing one. We then hear a cover for the already fitting Twilight Eternal, a classic from Sam & Max that was reprieved in the 3rd season of their escapades. Already featuring plenty of saxophones, this old tune was actually made a little bit more upbeat for its feature in the inventory. It provides a bit of relief from the otherwise fast-paced songs that all the other franchises have to offer, giving you a chance to kick back and relax, to watch Max's weirdness in all its glory. While The Walking Dead didn't make it to the table, it did make it to the soundtrack, twice over. There's the otherwise deceptively simple Dark Rooms, better known as the Crawford theme in the actual game, which is the main area of the 4th episode of the season. It gets a pretty huge, if brief, overhaul at the inventory. Then there's the tutorial-esque track Training Clementine, which plays when Lee teaches the 9-year-old how to shoot a gun. It too gets an overhaul with some great saxophone solos to boot. The big difference between the compositions in these games is the level of tension, the sense of urgency conveyed in them. In Poker Night: The Inventory, most of the music is very relaxing and laid back, not demanding much from the player. The best example of that, you might recall, was Emerson Johnson's rendition of Trogdor, which successfully pared back a loud, grab-you-by-the-neck rock song and revamped it into a jazzy classic. But in Poker Night 2, we get quite a bit more force. There's a real speed to many of the songs, a real sense of danger looming in the background for many of the original tracks. That feeling is preserved in their inventory reimagining. Where before, it was you hanging out with these characters, watching them shoot the wind together, it now feels like high-stakes poker with lots to be gained if the right move is made, and lots to be lost after a slip-up.
I'll just take that.
There were a good number of characters from Telltale's past projects that didn't quite make the final cut. Marty and Doc from Back to the Future were considered briefly, but were vetoed given their more family-friendly nature. They may have struggled to get much banter in with the other participants. Lee, the main character from The Walking Dead, and Larry, the game's first major antagonist, were also discussed at length by the staff. Including some of Telltale's most recent successful work felt like an obvious choice, but in the end, they thought it was just too soon to play around with these two in a comedic setting.
We had a very long discussion about having Lee at the table, or Larry, which I think would be awesome, as did many other people. Maybe they'll make it into future Poker Nights. The only reason they didn't was because that series was so fresh. There was extensive conversation about, can we really put characters from a game that makes people cry in a poker game? So we respected that. For now.
The inventory was intended to be all boarded up like the inside of the Everett drugstore, with zombies around, some of them being creepy and some of them getting drinks. All that survived was Jared's excellent jazzy covers.
Before the decision to cut Larry was finalised though, some in-game dialogue was actually written for him. Actually quite a lot of dialogue was written for him. A lot of it seems to revolve around his antagonistic character, with Claptrap going so far as to call him the Aristotelian ideal of a-holery. Some of it indicated that Girl Stinky was going to be the bartender at one point rather than Mad Moxie. Some cameo appearances from Carly are also present, and mention of a Walking Dead bounty item is also made by Winslow in some of the other files. Clearly the studio was quite serious about adding someone from the franchise. Ultimately, if they were to pick anyone, it'd probably be Larry, one of the less sympathetic characters who they could easily make the butt of the joke without any of their fans getting too upset about it. But even after Larry was cut from the game, the staff was still keen on referencing The Walking Dead in one way or another. Fully fledged conversations were written about their universe-specific zombies, and in one unused dialogue tree, the zombies seemed to invade the inventory. But even more interestingly than all of that, and a lesser known fact, Telltale also thought about dipping back into TF2's roster. This time they were going to get the Blue Medic on board, but for whatever reason opted for GLaDOS instead. There are some fairly radical ideas left over from their medic plans, showcasing his interest in the mechanical side of his fellow players. Most notably, he plans to give Claptrap a partially human brain. Apparently he's also distantly related to a 14th century blacksmith who helped make Ashley's hand. Some more of his dialogue did survive in the game files, and quite a lot of it was with our other cut character, Larry.
So Doc, you work for the BLU, right?
The Builders League United? Yeah.
Got any job openings?
It's something of a closed shop.
Oh, come on! I could be the salty old soldier whose scary battle stories inspire the troops. Kinda like an R. Lee Ermey type.
Well, we already have one of those. We call him Soldier.
Oh, damn it.
There were some final tweaks to the roster before release as well. Skunk Carpe was potentially going to replace our regular host, Reginald Van Winslow, but he was instead relegated to the car menu scene. He was going to chip into the conversations on occasion, and some leftover dialogue sees him tacking onto Sam's quip.
Don't worry about Skunk Ape. He's a barrel of laughs once you get to know him. Get it? Barrel? That's monkeys. Monkeys are in barrels, not gorillas.
And there's more. Both Bad Ash and the Mini Ashes were going to appear for some endgame cutscenes. One of the villains from the Venture Brothers was meant to appear to interrupt Brock's move, but again, it's not clear exactly who this would have been.
Didn't expect that, did ya?
Bigby Wolf himself was also planned to be in the game, but seems to only appear when the player wins or loses. Perhaps there was a Fables theme planned.
Yeah, I auditioned for the role of Bigby, but they said I wasn't wolfy enough.
They also said you should lose a few pounds.
Flint Paper from Sam & Max was going to have some lines, but it's not entirely clear what for. It's nothing too special, he's just written as making occasional random noises. Perhaps he was meant to fill a similar role that Steve ended up taking on in the end.
All right, I won. Go Claptrap, it's your birthday. Go Claptrap.
Hell?
What's that? What? Congratulations.
In the previous game, of course, Flint was actually present, sitting solemnly at the bar for the duration. Speaking of the bar, we can also see some remnants of a planned drinking game, the mechanics of which are not really elaborated. There's even a file full of prospective beverage names. Leftover text from the bounties indicates that at one point players themselves will be able to get their own drinks and could win hands with them. Win a hand under the influence of a 50-bit drink, says one bounty, while another wants you to play under the influence of a 10-plaque drink. There are some cut discussions of tokens where they're originally referred to as inventory plaques as well, with 3 X's. Perhaps style is in a similar vein to Moxie's own bar. One thing is certainly for sure, the tokens cycled through many different names before settling on the simpler currency term. Snooping around PokerNight 2's game files is always fun, and I'd recommend taking a look yourself by downloading the Telltale Explorer and poking around. You'll get to see all sorts of oddities, including early versions of the release trailers, which would be a little eerie if they weren't so unintentionally funny to watch.
Use the string with the rock.
Forget the rock. Fire your boomstick. This isn't working. Let's play something else. Something with high stakes.
Oh, I've got an idea, but we'll need another player.
There's quite a lot I couldn't cover here. Despite that, there's no cutting room floor page for PokerNight 2. I'd encourage those interested to delve into the files themselves and perhaps make the push for that page, since there's a lot worth documenting behind the scenes. We've talked a lot about its nuances and development, but just how well was PokerNight 2 actually received? Akin to its predecessor, the Poker Night sequel garnered mixed to positive reviews, in spite of its generously low price point, although it was generally regarded as the superior title by both established critics and more casual fans. For newcomers to the series, one of the biggest upsets was Bruce Campbell's absence from the table. While some fans thought that Danny Weber did a decent job, many more were quite unforgiving.
If you're not getting Bruce Campbell, why bother having Ash? Not even the awesomeness of Patrick Warburton can save this.
On the other hand, Telltale veterans levied more meta-criticism, worried about where the studio was straying. The lack of a Sam & Max sequel was worrisome enough, but now branching out to a whole host of AAA IPs, the face of TTG appeared to be changing.
The actual biggest issue I have with Poker Night 2 is not the fault of the game. Rather, after seeing Sam & Max in action again, it reminds me of how much they need a sequel. Nostalgia attack all the way.
But the game itself was largely hailed as an upgrade on the previous iteration. The characters had more banter, and some conversations were extended across several games. So in general, the sequel was praised for being a bit less repetitious. The prime issue with the sequel, though, was the lack of options compared to the first game. The removal of difficulty settings was a minor issue. The bigger problem was the inability to skip dialogue or change the amount said. The gift of the gab setting was lost, and the speeches could not be toned down, and so the players at the table are always chattering away. Except for when you're not playing a hand. Then a strong, eerie silence will come over the table. Again, not something that happened in Poker Night 1, in that you could just sit there and skip the poker entirely if you wanted. Your compatriots would keep talking regardless.
Hey Max, give me the skinny on your pockets.
Excuse me?
You know, where you keep all that stuff. That's like Hollywood magic, right?
No, but that was a nickname of mine in college.
Really?
No, I never went to college.
The big difference here, though, as mentioned earlier, was the reach the sequel had. It was released on Xbox before it got onto PC, so Telltale fans outside of the Steam space could get on board early doors. Xbox players received special avatar items for their participation, while PlayStation owners got some very nice background themes for their menus. The problem was that their usual target market didn't exactly come out in droves on the consoles. There was a lot of misunderstanding with regards to what Poker Night 2 was actually supposed to be. Some reviewers compared it to other poker simulators that they're used to, and were sorely disappointed when it didn't hold up.
A number of features that have become standard in poker games, and indeed online poker, are missing, such as the simple ability to tell the game that you want to fold before your turn comes around, or changing from the default first-person camera to an overhead table view. Most people will be interested in buying this game so that they can actually play poker, and there are a fair few problems with that side of things.
Features like these were never the aim at the inventory, of course. Focus was placed upon the characters, not the cards. But even those that were familiar with Telltale's games levied more familiar criticisms. A review for the PS3 version from Digitally Downloaded appreciated the idea, but not the execution.
Loading is frequent and causes distortions and pauses mid-conversation. There's no way to speed up the actual process of playing cards, extended dealing animation and all. Telltale Games deserves a lot of goodwill for this game as it's done right by fans of all the franchises involved. It just has not made a very good game on a technical level.
These issues were echoed on the Telltale forums generally, to the point where such complaints and the resolution of them gained their own sub-board. It marred the whole experience for many, some of whom on PSN were paying higher prices for what appeared to be an inferior product. Telltale's ports were widely panned, but at the time they were focused on a different, fast-growing platform for future releases. That place being, somewhat unexpectedly, the Apple Store. Telltale was looking to muscle in on the mobile market, as North Bay Business Journal also reported.
Retail game sales used to be a $25 billion a year market, but sales have been losing ground to downloads, and games for smartphones and tablets has become a $2 billion to $3 billion annual business.
Telltale was great at adapting to market trends like these. They were more than ready for the world of digital downloads, having based their whole business model on it and making indispensable connections with Valve early doors. But as they grew in 2012 and began to hit more casual bases, Telltale needed to expand their reach even further. The Walking Dead and Jurassic Park already had iOS ports, letting people play their hit titles on the go, although preferably on their tablets. I'm not sure a Walking Dead death scene can really have quite as much impact for a player when you're watching it on a tiny screen riding on the London Underground. This game, however, was different. Poker Night 2 was a perfect candidate for the world of mobile gaming. A casual experience with laid-back dialogue and straightforward cards. The sort of thing you can pick up and put down real easily with no strings attached. With the likes of Ash and CLAPTRAP in your back pocket, with the gift of their gab ready to go wherever you go, it certainly seemed like a worthwhile experiment. But it's not really discussed today. Most of the mobile competition is free. The release with the fewest frills and the highest comparative price, it's often forgotten that Poker Night 2 even came out on phones. There's no TF2 hats on an iPhone. Telltale staff themselves discouraged a double purchase due to a lack of loot. The reviews for the Apple launch were mostly positive, but echoed some old concerns. Reviewer Dave Flodine recommended the iPad version given the fiddly nature of the money slider. A French reviewer reported long load times being an issue, and difficulty maintaining a single game between separate play sessions. The app would occasionally just restart from square one without solicitation. Some others had oddly controversial reviews. Reviewer James Isabel was less forgiving, disappointed by the game's repetitive nature, and voicing concerns about Telltale's dysfunctional mobile strategy.
Sadly, Poker Night 2 seems to have fallen victim to the classic Telltale blunder of releasing iOS ports that are choppy, glitchy, and overall just not up to snuff with any other version of the game.
Everyone else seems to disagree though. Few fans reported a level of choppiness on any other Telltale title, and found most of their games ran well, although most of those commenters were running the game on newer devices. A greater number of people bought the Apple version than you might think. But if you have Poker Night 2 on your Apple device today, you may be holding a pretty rare piece of kit. When the game was pulled from sale, it was guaranteed that existing owners of a copy would be able to re-download it wherever they went, except for Apple users.
Telltale warns that Apple, in particular, may have issues with listing the game and will restore it to your account at their discretion.
Unlike other Telltale titles, Poker Night 2 has not been reacquired by any rights holder and hasn't received iOS support or store reinstatement for around 5 years now. If you uninstalled it, you struggle to get it back without foraying into the web of customer service technicalities that may or may not result in you repossessing a 10-year-old crossover game. But if you've got a working Apple copy, please do let us know.
The player wins the hand. Brock Samson has been eliminated.
Wow, I really didn't see this coming.
I did, but I didn't want to ruin the surprise. Surprise.
Poker Night 2 was the first of the series to be delisted from Steam and one of the first few Telltale games to be taken off the shelves before the company went bust. It was already clear to some that TTG was struggling since Poker Night 2 wasn't the very first Telltale game to get delisted. Wallace & Gromit's Grand Adventures was the first casualty, soon followed by Law & Order Legacies. It's not completely clear why Poker Night 2 departed well before Poker Night 1 was delisted. Game Watcher speculated that MGM, the rights holder for The Evil Dead, were essentially responsible for the early delist, putting the highest price on a renewed license. Meanwhile, Poker Night 1 would stay up for another year, likely due to its cheaper and more tight-knit licenses. But with no company to reacquire those distribution agreements and a lull before their LCG takeover, both games have now become orphaned works, prime pieces of modern abandonware. It was later rumoured on Reddit that when Telltale was rebooting again, Poker Night 3 was already in the works, albeit under a different name. Apparently it was meant to come out in 2021, but obviously that didn't happen. Some of their Telltale rumours did come true, but not all of them in the way we would have liked. Now, the new Telltale is continuing in their traditional adventure game boots, picking up where they left off on The Wolf Among Us, and creating a whole new setting in space, The Expanse, which has quite recently been released. The current staff at Telltale still don't have any firm plans to reboot Poker Night, as of yet, but I think someone should. The more I sit here and write about it, the more I realise just how great this format was. Sure, Poker Night 2 and its predecessor were a little rough around the edges. Repeated dialogue, clunky animations, subpar ports. But at the core of all this was a concept that people really strongly engaged with, which has now been cast to the side in pursuit of more ambitious titles. While before the goodies packaged with it seemed to carry its sale numbers, the series itself has become so well established that it could easily stand on its own 2 feet if reinstated today. Unfortunately, the complicated legal tangle that the franchise has found itself in makes it very difficult to bring back those old titles or make a new one in an official capacity, meaning it could be a dangerous game without enough reward for the new Telltale staff at LCG Entertainment's revamped version. What we need is a spiritual successor, someone to take the mantle forward and carry the card-laden torch. While we may never see another title at the inventory, specifically, the format itself doesn't need to die, and it doesn't even need to be poker. I'd be quite happy to play a game of Snap with the Engineer, or Solitaire with Nelson Tevers. It's more about what the characters say and how they bounce off of each other, rather than what they play. And hopefully one day, we'll see another game a little bit like the old Poker Night. But in the meantime, there's still more to talk about. While I'm done with Poker Night 2, for now at least, I have some footnotes to this script that I'd like to share. First up, a discussion of who might have been in a third Poker Night based on the wishes of the old team. After that, I've got a more lengthy video about the harms of abandonware, specifically with regards to the Poker Night series. I'd also like to say thanks to a few people, quite a lot of people actually. Special thanks to Mike Stemmle and Nick Herman for providing valuable insights on this game, and also to Jake Rodkin for his comment on the previous video. Special thanks to Greyfruit for giving the original video some renewed interest, but most of all, a very big thanks to the voice actors and other creators who did voice work on this video, including Finn from Nerds with a Feather, Dav and Tyler Fultz, Totally Tubular Jonathan, Vimbert, the J97 Gaming Show, Casper, Spider Slash, Garen Reaver, Joshua from Digital Upside, and my good friend Ben, who doesn't make videos but was in this video. I owe you all a favour though, for sure. Many of these creators have made videos about PokerNight and worked on some project related to it, or have made content on other Telltale titles. All of their stuff, which you will be interested in, is listed in the description, so I'd recommend giving that a watch. There's probably a lot of other people that I forgot to thank, so again, just look at that description. Loads and loads of content on PokerNight that isn't mine will be there for you to browse. But the biggest thanks, of course, goes to all of you. Feel free to watch those footnotes if you want, and maybe we'll rendezvous at the inventory again sometime. For now though, I'll see you later.